What I really get worried about is when I see a ship that doesn't have any challenges meeting the work rest house, then I know something is wrong. There will always be challenges, bigger or smaller. That's not the issue. The issue is how we deal with them. You know, there are no correlation between that a company that is 50 years old who has built policies and procedures year on year on year on year, so they have huge books of policies, are more safe than the newly started company with a very slim set of procedures and checklists. World-class crewing is what happens when the crew walks up the gangway until they walk down the gangway again and travel home. That period is the critical part.
What do you think is the biggest drivers for retaining a good crew?
That they're relieved on time, that they're paid on time, that they feel safe, trusted, and that they're working on a ship, safety and their living conditions being there are good to be there. And also senior officers or captains and chief engineers asking to get the same crew back to them.
Okay, welcome back to the Seafarer Social Podcast. Today I'm joined by Tommy Olofsen, the new Group Managing Director of OSM Thome, and somebody who I've known for some time now through Crew Connect Global in Manila. He's helped me out a lot. He's introduced me to a lot of people in the industry, and somebody whose perspectives and values when it comes to seafaring and crewing I really admire. But before we dig into anything, Tommy, I guess the best place to start is maybe learn a little bit more about your background. I know you've worked at OSM for some time now, but prior to OSM, were you a seafarer yourself?
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, I was a seafarer. I started as a seafarer when I was 17 years old. Straight out of school, joined at that time a small shipping company in Denmark that were operating a shipping line called the Nordaen shipping line, which was ro-ro carriers going from the US to Mediterranean. But moved on from there to Maersk, where I stayed 17 years. And went through the ranks from cadet to chief officer, and then I was lucky to come ashore a little by coincidence. To be honest, I was visiting the office, and the next day I started in the office in Maersk, and then that was in '99. And I haven't been back to sea in a capacity of a mariner, but It's always been about seafarers. It's always been about vessels and vessel performance and how we drive both the safe but also the best operations at sea. So that I did at Maersk. I went on to do it at TK for a while. Joined TORM, which is a large tanker company, and then I've been the last 12 years here with OSM and OSM Thome.
So you've had a really good taste of the industry, some big names there. Obviously, I imagine your time at Maersk was a period where you probably learned a lot. And TK is an interesting one because I've spoke to a lot of Indian seafarers that have worked at TK, John Adams as well, and they speak so highly of TK. I mean, TK was one of those shipping companies that had an incredibly strong brand value. Why do you think that is?
Oh, many things. One of them was that they were able to create an equal culture, or a culture more, not just between sex or male, female, or ship, shore, or so, but truly global, equal culture. And then the seafarers were really regarded highly. Torben Karlshøj and Bjørn Møller for many years the CEO, and Graham Westgard was there, John Adams was there, and so forth, all regarded seafarers and captains and chief engineers as vice presidents of the company. And that recognition of people brought a different respect between ship and shore and the whole culture of working together as a team. And something that I have tried to mirror a lot. The same was actually in Maersk in the old days. A lot of the same culture of the importance of seafarers. Mr. Møller himself in Maersk would also go onto ships and be visible to the seafarers, which I think is part of the success here, is that you actually engage, and not just by emails or phone, but actually meet seafarers on their ships and talk to them in their environment. It's a better conversation. And I think this is part of what made TK unique. And they cared. They truly care about their people, and still does today. So it's a great company. Whether you are Indian or you are Filipino or you are American or whatever you might be, it doesn't really matter in the TK's context. I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, it just so happened that the guys I did meet from TK were from India, but every single one of them spoke incredibly highly about the company, which I guess leads me into my first real question. If you, from your experience of being in this industry for some time now, and now you're obviously the head of one of the biggest ship management companies there are, what exactly does world-class crewing look like? When we talk about crewing as an entity, what is the picture of a world-class crewing facility?
Good question. For me, it is that you create this one-team culture. And on board, that means that you have the right people, competent people who trust each other, who can communicate clearly with each other and feel supported to actually make decisions. And equally as sure, that means being available, consistent, and close to the operation. And not just when something goes wrong or when there's challenges. What I see where the gap comes is that we're very good at designing good processes and procedures, and a lot of people talk about people first, but then day-to-day behavior doesn't always follow. We see sometimes that we get this mix between ship and shore. We get a slowdown on responses. We get a gap in responsibility and accountabilities. And we get, to some extent, examples of that seafarers are either left alone to solve their challenges on the ship, or are blamed because they're closest to the situation. And where I see that difference really coming well out is where we recognize that you can't sit in an office. Now I'm sitting in Arendal in southern Norway. I can't sit here in a nice office behind my screen and remote control a whole vessel operation that happens in, for example, West Africa or Southeast Asia. I need to trust the seafarers. I need to listen to them, and I need to support them in them being best at what they do. And therefore, world-class crewing really is less of the logistics of getting crew to and from the ships. World-class crewing is what happens when the crew walks up the gangway until they walk down the gangway again and travel home. That period is the critical part that I think too little is focused on in the crewing functions and because it is crewing, and crewing is, the word crewing for me means that you're getting people to the gangway and you're actioning when they walk down the gangway. But that's actually the least important. The most important is what happens when they are on board the ship.
And how much of that comes from choosing a fantastic captain to be on board that vessel? Is that the seed?
It's part of it. It's part of it. Leadership matters in everything you do, Carl. Whether you are on a ship or you are ashore or you are in any environment, having strong leadership, that's where you have visible leadership, you have strong communications, you drive that as a captain, you take ownership. It's your ship, it's your crew, it's your operation, matters a lot. So picking the right captains means a lot, but also having the right practices at a company. How do we deal with incidents? How do we deal with operational issues? How do we deal with treating performance in the right way? If we don't want, a blame culture, the opposite of blame is not no blame. The opposite of a blame culture is an accountability culture. And how we drive that accountability both towards the ships, but also from the ships to the shore organization means really a lot. So picking the right captain, definitely, but also creating that environment where people can develop, trust each other, can be safe, can be insecure about things, can speak openly about their insecurities, means a lot, means everything.
I spoke to one of the directors at Shell, and he said something to me which really stood in my mind, and it was, we need to let seafarers be seafarers. That's one of the pressing statements he said that really stuck with me. Would you agree?
I totally agree. We need it comes back to the same thing about sitting remotely controlling ships when you sit in your office is not possible. So we need to let seafarers be seafarers, and one of the things that has taken them away is all that paperwork that has been pushed to the ship, all this compliance work that has been given to the seafarers. That we need to automate or eliminate all that waste so that they can be seafarers and actually focus on safety and operations and crew well-being while they're together on a ship. It's a very intense environment, a ship to be in, and understanding that it is that intense environment is something that we need to spend even more time on, especially as newer generations are joining ships.
Yeah, and that last point I think is really interesting, because I know you have young sons. Am I right?
Yeah, I have one.
You have one young son. Forgive me. You have one young son. So in comparison to when you joined as a seafarer at the beginning of your career to the seafarers that you're now employing on board your vessels, what's the sort of shift you've seen in this Gen Z generation of seafarers? Are they looking for something different than previous generations?
Yes, there's still this thing of joining is to work in a global environment, be a global citizen, and see the world and experience the world and make a difference, right? That still is very much the same. But what's different is the whole way we engage with each other. So there is we see an understanding that they're much better at handling the digital relationships. So how you're engaging with each other through digital means, and with Starlink coming on board almost all ships, there is an opportunity to actually engage with that audience in a better and more efficient way, where we can create those relationship bonds that are new, especially for old people like me, in how we were engaging at that time. You know, when I started sailing, there was a satellite phone that cost a fortune to use, so nobody did. And you know what we got was post and mail from friends and everything from home. And I remember I was 52 days at sea without getting any post or anything from home. And that was a different lifestyle, but also in some ways probably less worrisome than being aware of what goes on in the world that you're missing while you're sailing.
And how do you manage that? Because I remember when I was at Singapore Maritime Week last year, at an Inmarsat conference, there was a gentleman from Japan who was in the world of ship management. He said to me, you know, one of the biggest issues we have is you got a young guy comes on, he's been away, he's on a 6-month contract, he's 3-4 months deep. His girlfriend texts him, says, you know, I can't do this anymore. It's over, right? He has a meltdown. How do you manage that situation? His argument was, you know, we go back to the dinosaur ages. It was way simpler then. He wouldn't have found out if there was no internet on board. But then equally at the same time, you know, we're pushing for internet connectivity almost as a human right for seafarers. So how do you manage that?
A little bit the same way as you're managing it, as you know, for people living ashore, is that you make sure that there is a support available to you. You know, we are fortunate in OSM Thome in that we 7-8 years ago decided on creating our own medical clinics and having our own doctors and psychologists with us, and we have provided a lot of studies also to form opinions in the industry on how is health of seafarers, not just the physical but very much the mental side of things. So we are running mental health campaigns onto the ships. We are providing awareness tools, but also hotlines to crew, to all our seafarers, where they can have someone to talk to And then we are trying to create more safe rooms where it's also important that we can talk about the softer parts of our life, the tougher parts and the emotions parts, which in still a quite male-dominated industry is not that normal to speak openly about being sad or being homesick or other things. So these elements we are trying to build upon with our ships. We also have some coaches and so forth that comes to our ships who are trained in looking at the morale and the engagement on seafarers on board, and to make sure we have the right culture and the right focus. But it doesn't always work, Carl. Sometimes we get it wrong also, right? And we don't catch it in time, and we have a seafarer who becomes really sad and wants to go home, and there we listen carefully and we look for ways where we can support that seafarer best possible. And it's not always that you can just get people home. So we need to find good ways on how we do that. But it boils down to having a trusting environment and an open communication. That's what we're working towards. And my good colleague Didoy, he's a big advocate for this type of things that we are doing.
Do you think there is an optimal, healthy rotation pattern? Like, what would you say with all of the work and the analysis you've done on this, and working with external partners and sending people on board who can speak to the seafarers? Have you found sort of that sweet spot yet? No, in general terms, and yes, in specific terms. So we are fortunate that we are operating around 60 different vessel types. We have 72 different nationalities in our seafarer pool. We have 30,000 active seafarers, and more than 1,000 ships that we are on the water at any given time that we have our seafarers on. What we see is that it's very much what type of ship are you on, what type of environment are you operating in, and what's that rotation linked to that. So, for example, we have vessels trading up here in the North Sea right now, outside the UK in the winter months. You can't be on an offshore ship there for very long periods without it affecting your health and your physical and mental well-being. So there we have shorter rotation patterns, all depending on roles and responsibilities and so forth. And often shorter rotation also than what is dictated through CBA agreements and so forth, where it makes more sense for us. But we also have ships where it's normal to have very long periods on board, but where the work and life on board those ships, because of long voyages, excellent trading in good weather areas and so forth, and long port stays also, that on those ships we see a longer tenure on board makes a lot of sense. And we actually have examples of seafarers asking to stay longer because it also fits their lifestyle well and better. So I don't have one answer for it, but what we're looking at when we look at what's a healthy rotation is that we need to make sure that seafarers has enough rest, that it supports their life in general, but especially their family life, and where we have the right continuity on board, where we don't have a situation where rotations are constantly extended or changed, because that builds fatigue, and then we see trust between ship and shore. For example, when seafarers are not relieved on time is really something that we measure as a strong KPI to make sure that we have 99.7% seafarer reliefs on time is our KPI. We see sometimes we cannot, because the ship are in a location where we cannot do crew changes. Either it's not safe or it's not right for the operations, and then we have to either do it earlier or later. I think that's it's such a difficult thing to juggle, isn't it? And there's fine lines between each approach. But I do think that point you made, which sometimes I think doesn't get spoken about enough, is that actually a lot of seafarers want to stay on longer. You know, I've spoke to guys in the Philippines where maybe they've done a 6-9 month contract, and they're saying to the captain at the end, "Captain, please keep me on," because they realize that 1 or 2 contracts, they could build their own house. They could build their own house back home in the Philippines. That's a really big deal. And I don't think people speak about that enough.
That's one side of it, and we also have junior officers who want to progress to senior officers who either needs the sea time or to make sure their rotation matches with being home when they can actually take that next step COC requirement to actually take up an next rank opportunity. And then we have so unique vessels in our portfolio that sometimes get assigned to some really exciting jobs also. And we have seafarers who's coming to us and saying, I'm not ready to go home. I want to do that job also because it gives me an experience I don't want to lose out on. So there's many facets to it, but nonetheless, we still need to look at is it still the right choice to keep the seafarer on board, or has that trade and the work and everything that's happened on their tenure on board been supporting that they can stay longer, and then we make a decision based on the specific situation.
Yeah. You said,
but it's a big juggle. It's a big juggle.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and you're never going to make everybody happy. That's for sure.
No, that's impossible.
Tommy, you said something earlier on, and it's this word vessel performance, and I want to dig into that a little bit more because that really is, I guess, the art as a ship management company. Of all of the signals that you look at in terms of vessel performance, if you had to pick just one signal that really indicates whether or not a vessel will operate safely and smoothly, what would be that number one most important signal to you?
A signal is stability, to be honest. Stability in crew, stability in the operational data points that I have is one of them. So seafarers wanting to come back is a key measure, that they would like to come back to the ship and they would like to be there. And also senior officers or captains and chief engineers asking to get the same crew back to them is a very healthy sign of a good performing ship, because there you've got it right. You have set a team that trusts each other and deliver very well. So that's one key, but the safety statistics often tells a lot also. And one of the biggest challenges we have is work rest hours in ship management on board the ships. It doesn't get talked a lot about, but it is a real challenge to meet these work rest hours. What I really get worried about is when I see a ship that doesn't have any challenges meeting the work rest hours, then I know something is wrong, because they should have challenges there with how it's set up. And in general, I don't have a problem with that we have challenges. We are operating ships in a 24/7 operational environment. There will always be challenges, bigger or smaller. That's not the issue. The issue is how we deal with them. So that culture of how you're dealing with challenges is probably another one that drives vessel performance. And then cost is important. And what I can tell you is that we see that there's no linkage between performance and high cost. So you don't necessarily have a better performing ship because you're spending more money. There's not a direct correlation there, which is interesting. And actually we see the same when you have a cook who makes food, right? It's not a question of spending the most money on ingredients to make a nice meal. It's actually the ones that makes the best meals are those who are best at putting these things together and has no waste. And that's ship management. It is that's the same job that we are doing. We are prioritizing making sure that the seafarers and the ships has what they need, and we are supporting them in it. But that ownership of really driving the right culture and the right behaviors and everything throughout is evident also in the cost. Just to be honest with you,
you touched on one of the subjects, which is work rest hours. This is again a very sensitive area. In fact, when I was at Crew Connect, as you probably remember, Chief McCoy came on stage with me, and he said a very bold statement, which is work rest hours is one of the most violated policies in shipping. He said that many seafarers are frankly putting the wrong rest hours down because they want to make sure they're saying the right thing for port states and so on and so forth. So my question to you, and by the way, that clip, we clipped that, put it on social media. It got over 1 million views. It's the biggest.
Wow.
It's the biggest video that's ever been done by sea trade event ever, and it was Chief McCoy, and all of the comments we got were from seafarers and the families of seafarers saying that this is one of the biggest issues. But the problem is, I haven't seen anybody be able to provide a solution because it's such a tricky subject, right? The nature of this job is you will be working intense hours. It's not for everybody. But, how do you optimize that? Is it, again, down to the captain and so on and so forth?
It's very much down to the captain, but it's also very much down to how an organization, and an organization here is the total environment around the ship, including the port state, the end customers, et cetera, reacts to that there is violations on the work rest hours. I'm coming back to. We will have challenges at times meeting it, right? The point here is, what do you do about it? How are you reacting to it? And how do you take the learnings out and make sure you become better following any violations of a policy, whether that being work rest hours, whether that being relieving crew on time, whether that being incidents happening and so forth. How are you adapting as an organization and becoming better is the key question here to answer. And if you just consider it as incidents or writing a new policy or making a new checklist, then you haven't solved it. I'll be honest with you. There are no correlation between that a company that is 50 years old who has built policies and procedures year on year on year on year, so they have huge books of policies, are more safe than the newly started company with a very slim set of procedures and checklists. There are no correlation there, because the fact that you are an experienced company and have built up a lot of procedures and checklists is often a consequence of incidents that has happened. And then to avoid that happens again, then you're making a new checklist or a new procedure. But the chances of that the exact same thing happens twice is really small. So the solution of writing more and more procedures and checklists doesn't do anything good for the seafarers and their rest hours and everything else and their safety in general. What helps is that you build learning into your culture, into speaking up, stop unsafe acts, and actually plan better and work better together. Shipshore and the whole organization, as I started talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we'll touch on that connection a little bit more. I'm going to ask you something a little bit controversial.
Okay.
And feel free to say you don't wish to answer, but are port states looking for reasons to find vessels?
To find vessels? What do you mean?
To find vessels, to find reasons to charge vessels. Are they looking for things that one of the things Chief McCoy said in that clip is that sometimes he's found that port states, when you are actually looking for reasons to find vessels. Would you agree with that statement? Are they looking for ways they can find to essentially draw more money out of the ship?
I mean, that in any industry, in any area, there would be situations that are not ideal, including also at that there would be people looking for those ways. We are part of the maritime clusters and organizations fighting corruption, bribery, and payments as a principle of solving issues. We don't believe in that. What we believe in is an open and transparent way of operating all ships. That being said, a port state inspection is the minimum standards. And we welcome on any of our ships, we welcome at any state in any port that the port state comes on board to inspect if we are doing things the way we should do and if our ship are up to the standards. And we support that very much. I very much support that we keep building a higher and higher quality and minimum standards across our industry. That needs to continuously lift up to drive the right safety and the right structures. I think the best way to counter any antitrust challenges that ships are facing, whether that being people asking for money or what it else must be, is to have solid procedures, have an organization ashore that supports the ships, and one that is a zero tolerance to those things, and supporting the seafarers in handling such situations. And we are living by those values as a company, and we are not leaving the seafarer alone in such situations. We are gathering up behind them and supporting them if they are facing such challenges. And to be honest, we see less and less and less of those situations. That's
earlier on when I asked you about vessel performance, you said one of the key signals for us to show that a vessel is performing well is when the crew are asking for the same crew to come back. And that sort of, works around this big key word we keep hearing about, which is retention. What do you think is the biggest drivers for retaining a good crew?
That they're relieved on time, that they're paid on time, that they feel safe, trusted, and that they're working on a ship where safety and their living conditions being there are good. And that's what that's the fundamentals and it shouldn't be something that drives retention. This should be human rights for any ship. But ITF announced last week an annual report on abandoned seafarers and seafarers not being paid, and appalled. I'm saddened. I'm frustrated that seafarers are treated like that.
And it's getting worse every year.
Yeah, maybe it seems like it's getting worse, but otherwise it's a consequence of what we talked early on, is that the world is getting more connected and that it's just coming up now. It's just being visible now what's happening. It is unacceptable not to treat seafarers well. And what, one of the things where I've tried not to talk too much about my company here, but one of the things where we stand out as a ship management company is that we employ our seafarers ourselves. This is our colleagues. This is my colleagues. The seafarers are my colleagues. No other ship management company in the world employs their seafarers. No one. They all employ them on an agency only. So if you're acting as an agent only towards your seafarers, you're already making a signal there, in my opinion. And to me, seafarers are our colleagues. They are our employees. They are what we deliver as a business, as a service. And that's why I like ship management and crew management compared to sitting in a ship owner and doing it internally. Because their ship management to me is like a cost center. Whereas here, that's our bread and butter. That's what we live off. And that's why we need to be the world's best at what we do. And that's exciting me.
That's certainly one of the most unique value propositions I've ever heard from a ship management company. And I think it's incredibly impressive that you guys have done that, because it's something that a lot of seafarers are fighting for. They want to be, and so they should be.
Should be simple, right? And it's the basic. So what drives retention? What is the same things that drives vessel performance, and it's the same things that drives the right culture that you talk TK had or have still. And that boils down to trust. It boils down to doing what you say you do and treating people fairly and respectfully. And I think we do that. We have had a slogan for many years. We're not putting it out there all the time because it was overused, but it is that it's all about people. But for me, it's all about seafarers. And you have known me for some time, Carl. You know my passion for seafarers and my belief in seafarers. And it originates from the young entrants to our industry, like the cadets and so forth. But it's very much also to the vast majority who's out there and how we are supporting them in actually being best at what they do.
Earlier on, you said at OSM Thome, I think you said you had your 30,000 crew from 72 different nationalities. Is that correct?
Yeah, 72 nationalities.
72 different nationalities. Okay, so you're probably one of the best people to ask this question to then. So we're hearing a lot of noise at the moment about emerging labor markets, right? I think the ICS are releasing a report later this year about the statistics when it comes to dominated labor markets. Obviously, the Philippines is up there. A lot of people talk about China as well. You have Indonesia, you have India. But you also have these other markets. You have some disruption in Eastern Europe because of the Ukraine-Russia war. But you also have these emerging markets now. People are talking about Africa. I've met a lot of Fijian seafarers. You and I had a conversation. I don't know if you remember back in 2024 where you told me about seafaring in Brazil. That's a market that you guys operate in, and there's many female seafarers come from Brazil as well. I remember you said something to me about that as well. So my question to you is, based on the fact that you guys have hired 30,000 seafarers from 72 different nationalities, what do you predict in 5-10 years' time will be the dominant labor markets when it comes specifically to volume?
To volume, there is some macroeconomic aspects that drives why it's attractive to be a seafarer. And what we see is that in Philippines, it will for some time still be an attractive career. It pays well. It's the entry level towards the seafaring career is accessible to many, and it's seen, it's respected and looked upon as a good career choice. We're seeing in other industries that's maybe less, but we see Philippines as for us will continue to be a very important source for future seafarers also. Our three largest manning pools is Philippines, India, and Ukraine. As it stands, we're also very large in Poland. We are very large in the Baltic countries. We have a large representation, as you talked about, in Brazil. We're also having a very large representation in Australia, in New Zealand, in China, in Norway, where I am now, in Scandinavia, because of our structure. We're seeing our UK manning pool is growing quite rapidly with more and more UK seafarers joining our fleet, which is super positive. So we see these changes. But one of the things we have really started, what is the right word, with a focus on, has been West Africa. And I think you and I talked about Ghana earlier, that in Ghana we have a very solid manning pool down there and quality seafarers joining our fleet, and actually a lot of female Ghanese seafarers joining our fleet who's performing very well. So I'm not answering you in total terms here, but I'm just saying that we're seeing those markets develop. Indonesia is another one. Sorry for missing that. Indonesia is a market that's growing very rapidly for us also right now.
How does a market become a dominant maritime labor market? Because if you look at Philippines, Philippines has 80 maritime schools, so the infrastructure is there already, right? Whose responsibility is it to build those maritime schools? Does it come from the private sector? Is it the government? How do you identify an area that could become an emerging seafarer labor market, and whose responsibility is it to invest into that maritime platform?
Good question. So what we're looking at is we're looking for stable government and stable political systems and structures that support the development, particularly for the new areas we are going into. We are seeing that it's very much driven in a mix between the government infrastructure or what's existing already, combined with a lot of private investment. So if you go and look in Philippines, for example, training schools is to a large extent a commercial business. I'm a little concerned when that gets too commercial without having a linkage back to the industry to make sure that what you actually train for, the seafarers also gets a job at the end of it, because it's a big investment for the seafarers. So particularly in Philippines and in India, there is it's a large business to run academies and training schools. But the challenge I see there is that in some context, we see more seafarers being trained at the academies than there is actually training positions available to them. Training positions, both because of their competence coming out of the schools and their so the quality of their education, but equally because they might be training the wrong, you could say, the wrong skills and what's needed. And that means that in a place like Philippines, we're talking about excessive numbers being trained every year who doesn't actually get to utilize those skills. And that's a concern for me. So the government role will be to govern and ensure the quality of those private establishments and have a rigid approval process for that to make sure that the quality remains top notch and that the people who goes to those training actually comes out with a job at the other end. But this is difficult, and it's one that I don't shy away from discussing with the Philippine government and politicians and organizations when I'm there. As you also know, I think we were part of the same discussion last time.
Yeah, 25 to 50,000 surplus per year seafarers of cadets that don't get their berths. Now, supposedly, the Magna Carta was signed to be something that was to fix this, and part of the Magna Carta is to raise the standard of education, quality of education, to a certain level. But when you have 80 different maritime schools, that's incredibly difficult to. And you're right, it's a business. It's a business at the end of the day. These kids pay anything from $500 to $2,000 per year for their training. That's a lot of money.
Exactly.
So it's a difficult problem to solve. But you answered it very well. I think you're right. It's a collective problem. It should be private sector, government, and also policymakers as well. I think should also play a big part, like the IMO and so on and so forth.
No, I totally agree.
Tommy, I respect your time. We've done 45 minutes. My last question to you is, you're somebody whose insights and understanding of this industry I massively admire. One of the things we keep hearing about is everyone's talking about people. You said, for me, it's about the seafarers. What are your predictions over the next couple of years, especially 2026, the start of the new year? How do you see the industry changing?
Oh, that's a big question, Carl. My worry right now is very much around the geopolitical situation that we are seeing. It's a different world than we just looked at 2-3 years ago. There is unrest many places, and we need, ships trade globally, trades everywhere. And therefore, how that environment is changing and how we secure as operators to operate safely in those under those parameters is a real challenge. And then I think even though that for a while maybe the focus is less on green shipping with what happened at IMO and all that, I think this year I hope we get back to a common understanding of the challenges facing us and the pathway to 2050 when we have a much greener shipping industry, and how we get there is important. And as I said earlier, we in our company that we're in now, we welcome global standards and preferably as high as possible, driving this industry forward, so we get a level playing field. And so my big hope for this year is that when we have the MEPC at IMO later in the year, I hope for a different outcome than what we saw last year.
I agree. And one last bonus question, Tommy. I speak a lot about the seafarers on this podcast, naturally, given the name. And for me, really, they're the core of everything I do. But I don't think that necessarily I give enough attention to the owners, and they're such an important part of this industry as well. So I guess my question to you is, and this is just a throw out one, if an owner comes to you and they say, Tommy, look, we've got 5 vessels, we want you to manage them, but I want to know, how are you going to make me a profitable venture? How are you going to make my vessels the maximum amount of profit they possibly can be? What is the answer to that owner?
Well, first of all, I'm not involved in the commercial operation of the ships. As ship managers, we are focused on the safe and quality operations at the best possible OPEX level, driving that. So what we do is that we lend out our infrastructure, being our systems, our tools, our practices, our DOC, which is our documents of compliance, which is really the license to operate, to those ship owners who needs to have vessels operated. And what I can offer them is that stability and hassle-free operation is generally what I offer. So what I aim to offer all my customers is a focus on predictability and long-term vision on what we are doing here, so that we have as little insecurities in that. But I want to be sure, and I said that in another interview earlier, is what we are building at OSM Thome is this club feeling. So when you are a member of a club, the reason you're a member of a club is as much because you like the club, right? But often it's because you're looking around for who are the other members and do you fit with those members. So when we welcome ship owners into our club, then we are very careful making sure that they fit that way of operating that we believe in, and that they can recognize themselves with the other partners in our group. Because if I invite ships onto my platform with owners that doesn't share my values and doesn't believe in the same quality standards that we have and wish to operate on a lower standard, that impacts all the others. So I can't do that. So again, back to standards and qualities. We are proud of who we are, and we stand by who we are. We deliver a really good product, and we do that by focusing on seafarers first, and realizing that the real performance happens on board the ships. It doesn't happen in this office. I think that's my view.
Thank you very much for your time. I've learned a lot from this conversation.
Carl.
Every conversation we have, I always learn a lot. I really respect you, and thank you so much for giving me 45 minutes of your time. And hopefully we can do this again face to face. That would be good.
That would be nice. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.